So, our very last guest for the day is a very special treat that we have lined up for you. You may have heard about or read the current New York Times best-selling book, The Parkinson's Plan. We are fortunate to have the co-author with us today. Dr. Dorsey holds a Bachelor of Science in Biological Sciences from Stanford University and earned a joint MD, MBA from the University of Pennsylvania's Perelman School of Medicine and the Wharton School. Though his career began in consulting with McKinsey & Company during the dot-com boom, a pivotal conversation with a mentor changed his life's direction, leading him back to medicine and ultimately to neurology. Dr. Dorsey completed his residency in neurology at the University of Pennsylvania, followed by a fellowship in movement disorders and experimental therapeutics at the University of Rochester. There, he began a distinguished career focused on improving care for individuals with Parkinson's and other neurological disorders. From 2010 to 2013, he served as the Associate Professor of Neurology at Johns Hopkins, where he pioneered global telemedicine programs for Parkinson's care, reaching patients on 6 continents. In 2014, he returned to Rochester as the David M. Levy Professor of Neurology and co-director of the Center for Health and Technology, helping turn the university into a leader in virtual care and decentralized clinical trials. Dr. Dorsey's vision is clear: to move medicine out of hospitals and into homes and communities, making care more accessible, personal, and preventive. In 2015, his work was recognized by the White House when he was named a champion of change for his leadership in Parkinson's care innovation. Over the course of his career, he has authored over 200 peer-reviewed articles and helped secure more than $60 million in research funding. Today, Dr. Dorsey is a practicing neurologist at Atria and director of the Center of the Brain and the Environment, where he leads groundbreaking research into the environmental causes of brain diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. His goal is to prevent these diseases before they start and to end Parkinson's in this generation. He is a co-author of Ending Parkinson's Disease, published in 2020, and the recently published Parkinson's Plan, a new path to prevention and treatment. Please help me welcome Dr. Ray Dorsey.
Thank you. That's a very kind introduction. Can you hear me okay? Outstanding. Thank you very much, Alicia. Thank you very much, Keisha. Thank you very much to the Dallas Area Parkinson's Society for welcoming me here today. How many people here would like to know why they have Parkinson's disease? How many people here would like to have their Parkinson's disease slowed? How many people would like to prevent their kids and grandkids from getting this terrible disease? And so I'm hoping to give you answers to each of those questions today. Some of the information I'm going to tell you can be disturbing. Quite frankly, it disturbs me quite a bit, and that's why I'm here to tell you that Parkinson's disease is not a natural consequence of aging. Parkinson's disease is not a natural consequence of aging. It is a preventable disease. Next slide. I think it's on. I'll just tell you, if I just tell you, perfect. Next slide. And the next slide. So Parkinson's disease is one of the world's fastest growing brain diseases. In 1990, it was estimated that 2.6 million people had the disease worldwide. Today, the estimate is 11.8 million. In the span of 30 years, the number of people with Parkinson's disease has more than quadrupled. No other brain disease looks like this. No other brain disease looks like this. As I said earlier, it is not a natural consequence of aging. You put a mouse into a lab and you let it age, it does not spontaneously develop Parkinson's disease. For that matter, it does not spontaneously develop Alzheimer's disease. The only way that mouse will develop Parkinson's disease is either one, you manipulate its genes, or 2, you expose it to toxic chemicals. This graph motivates me. My friend and co-author, Dr. Michael Oken, and I look at this graph and we see our report card. And in this case, a rise is not a good sign, it's a bad sign. So Alicia just gave a very nice introduction, all of my credentials and the like, yet it's on my watch, that Parkinson's is one of the world's fastest growing brain diseases. On my watch. My colleagues answered the bell for HIV. My colleagues answered the bell for COVID. My colleagues, even in neurology, have answered the bell for stroke, the incidence of which is declining. We have failed to answer the bell for Parkinson's disease. When I sit in the back and I listen to the outstanding musical therapy, I actually get a little pissed off. When I'm 70 years old, I don't want to be doing tongue twisters. When I'm 70, I don't want to be doing tongue twisters. I want to be caring for other people who in need. I don't want to be the one receiving the care. And so that's why I'm here to help end this disease in our generation. I don't want 20, 30 years from now to be seeing this graph going up. I want to see it to be going down. And so Michael and I wrote a book, and we outline a plan, a PLAN, to prevent the disease for the preventable, to learn why the disease begins, because if you want to cure a disease, you need to know why it begins. If you want to cure a disease, you need to know the cause. I want to amplify the voices of those people in this room who are most directly affected by the disease, because the course of diseases, the fate of diseases, is not tied to neurologists, it's tied to people who are most directly affected by the disease. Many of you in this room are young enough to remember the March of Dimes. And why did the March of Dimes begin? Because a president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, had a disease and he shared it with the public. And he said, I don't want other people to get the same disease I have. And some of you contributed monies. The March of Dimes began in 1938. So many people were involved that it flooded the White House with dimes. You can't even mail currency into the White House anymore. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's on the dime. I don't know if many people realize that. And 17 years after the March of Dimes began, just 17 years, Jonas Salk in Pittsburgh held up a vaccine that prevented polio. And now we live in a world largely free of polio. So that's why we need to amplify your voices, because that's how we change diseases. And finally, I know almost everyone in this room wants better treatments, right? Everyone wants better treatments, fantastic. So Michael Oken, the latter parts of the book, tells you how to navigate the frontier of new treatments, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Next slide. So first, what are the causes of Parkinson's disease? So when I was in medical school, I was taught that Parkinson's disease was the causes of it were largely unknown. It's got to be something to do with our genes and something with our aging and maybe some bad luck. And maybe I heard a word about pesticides. So let's take a look at these. So genes. So there's a great study called PG Generation, led by the Parkinson's Foundation. Kudos to them. And they offer, it's the study still ongoing, they offer free genetic testing and genetic counseling to anyone with Parkinson's disease. Anyone participate in the study? There's outstanding people in this room. And so you get free genetic counseling and genetic testing, and they analyze the results of the first 8,000 participants published in one of our leading journals called Brain last year. And they looked at the results of the first 8,000 participants, and 13% of them carry a genetic cause or genetic risk factor for the disease. 13%. Said another way, 87% of Americans with Parkinson's disease do not carry any known genetic cause or genetic mutation for the disease. The vast majority of people in this room with Parkinson's disease have nothing to do with any known genetic cause or risk factor for the disease. Two options. One, there are other genetic causes, we haven't identified them. I'm a little skeptical of that. There are probably ones, they're probably rare, but my colleagues are really, really, really smart. We have really, really good tools to assess genetics. And we've had 35,000 publications on the genetics of Parkinson's disease. Option two is that the principal causes of Parkinson's disease do not lie within us. They lie outside of us in our environment, and chemicals in our food, water, and air, which are fueling the rise of chronic diseases, including Parkinson's. Next slide. And so some of you might be wondering, is this applied to other parts of the world? And what about people with young onset Parkinson's age before 50? And so researchers in Europe looked at Europeans, at people in North and South America, and the Middle East, found the exactly same conclusion. 14% of people in that study carry a genetic cause or genetic risk factor for the disease. Again, 85% of people with Parkinson's disease in large portions of the world have nothing to do with any known genetic cause or risk factor for the disease. Even those who are under 50, only 20% carry a genetic cause or genetic risk factor. If you have age of onset below 30, only 30%. 70% of people with age of onset below 30 have nothing to do with any known genetic cause or risk factor for the disease. If you are in the extraordinarily rare group of having the age of onset at under 20 and you have a family history of the disease, it's still a coin flip as to whether you carry a genetic cause or genetic risk factor. I personally have never made a diagnosis of Parkinson's in someone that young. So the overwhelming evidence, which we've known for over 100 years, when Sir William Gower said that only 15% of my patients in 1890 in England have a family history of the disease, the overwhelming evidence is that that the environment is a principal explanation for Parkinson's disease. Next slide. So what are the major environmental factors? I'm going to highlight three, and I think these are the three that are the most important for people in Texas. I think these are the three most important reasons for people in the United States. And they are certain pesticides, including a pesticide called paraquat. How many people have heard about paraquat? All right, so we'll get you warmed up. So paraquat is a weed killer. It's sprayed in Texas. It's sprayed on cotton fields in Texas. It's sprayed on cotton fields in Texas today, even though China has banned it. I know Texans don't like to follow, you like to lead. And I know to you and to me, it seems really odd that over 50 countries, including China, have banned a weed killer that we allow to be sprayed on the fields in Texas. Not only are the farmers associated with a 150% increased risk if you spray paraquat, but simply living or working near where paraquat is sprayed doubles your risk of Parkinson's disease. Doubles it. And I'm going to tell you what we're going to do about that. I'm going to tell you how you can contact the EPA administrator today. I'll give you his email address, and you can tell him to ban paraquat. Second major cause, maybe even more common, is a degreasing chemical, a lot of degreasing done in Texas, also used in dry cleaning. It's called trichloroethylene. How many people know about trichloroethylene? So trichloroethylene is a very simple chemical molecule. We'll go to little high school chemistry. Everyone remembers water. Remember water? Water is made up of how many atoms? How many atoms in water? 3 atoms. Very good. H2O, 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. Trichloroethylene is made up of a whopping 6. 2 carbons in black, 1 hydrogen in white, and 3 chlorines in blue, hence its name trichloroethylene. It's got a dry cleaning cousin that's called tetra or perchloroethylene that's got 1 additional chlorine atom, hence the prefix fluor, and it's still widely used in dry cleaning. If you dry clean your clothes in Texas, you are likely getting exposed to a chemical that, along with this one, have been associated with a 500% increased risk of Parkinson's disease. So after this, you will stop using your regular dry cleaner. You'll find a green dry cleaner. You can even buy our book. We even tell you in more detail about how to do this. And then Julia will hand out cards so you can learn more about our book and perhaps slow the rate of progression of the disease. Because if you're a smoker and you're diagnosed with lung cancer, what's the doctor going to tell you to do? But if you're a farmer and you're working with paraquat, you see the neurologist, what aren't they telling you about? Paraquat. And if you're with Parkinson's disease and you're still dry cleaning your clothes, are you getting the message to stop using dry cleaners with chemicals associated with Parkinson's disease? Could this be a good thing to be still being exposed to paraquat? I don't think so, right? If anything, it's got to be a good thing to stop being exposed. And we know that certain individuals have a faster rate of progression and some people have a slower rate of progression. I am increasingly concerned, perhaps even convinced, that individuals who have no more exposure are more likely to have a slower rate of progression than people who have ongoing exposure. And the last risk factor I want to talk about is air pollution. So unfortunately, not great air quality today in Dallas. So when you look outside and you see smog, you're actually seeing little pieces of dirt and soot. The fancy technical term is particulate matter. These little pieces of dirt and soot, most of them are large enough that we cough them out or sneeze them. Some, though, are so small, 1/30 the width of my hair, that they can be inhaled, and they can go through the nerve that's responsible for smell that hangs up in our upper nasal passages. And hitchhiking on that particulate matter are toxic metals, lead from leaded gasoline, iron from brakes, platinum from catalytic converters. And many of you know that one of the earliest features of Parkinson's disease is loss of smell. The most common place that the pathology of Parkinson's disease is found, even more common than the part of the brain that's responsible for tremor, is in the smell center of our body, called the olfactory bulb. That's the most common place you'll find the pathology associated with Parkinson's disease, and likely one of the first places it begins. So there's increasing evidence that Parkinson's disease either begins in the nose or in the gut, and from there, from the nose, spreads backwards to the part of the brain that's responsible for the tremor and slowness of movement. These individuals might have early features of loss of smell, tend to have more asymmetric disease. Some people who might be ingesting chemicals, think about contaminated well water. Wells tend to be in rural areas, prone to contamination from pesticides from nearby farms. They might have pathology beginning in the gut and therefore have early constipation, might get problems with early sleep disturbances before they later develop the classic features of Parkinson's disease. All these things are addressable. All of them are preventable. Next slide. So this is where paraquat is sprayed according to the U.S. Geological Survey. You can see it's sprayed here in Texas. In our book, we talk about a young man, Steve Phillips, who as a teenager left his surfboard in Southern California and came for 2 summers to spray paraquat on cotton in West Texas. Came to Texas as a 17 and 18-year-old for 2 summers, sprayed paraquat on cotton farms in West Texas, and about 20 or 30 years later developed Parkinson's disease. Now, can I say for certain that his spraying of paraquat led to his Parkinson's disease? No, it's really, really hard to do that for an individual, and we don't have good ways of measuring these chemicals in people's bodies to determine if that's the case. But it certainly is concerning, given that research done in 2011 showed that individuals, farmers who spray the chemical, have a 150% increased risk of the disease. And when you expose laboratory animals to paraquat, they develop the features of Parkinson's disease down to a tremor. This in 2018, the last year for which we have data on the use of paraquat in the United States, you would think would be decreasing, but it's not. It's increasing. Use of paraquat in the United States has more than doubled in the last 5 years for which data are available. Next slide. So this is trichloroethylene. This is widely used in degreasing. It was initially used in dry cleaning. Do you know why we dry clean clothes? Does anyone know why we dry clean clothes? Anyone? No, not cheaper. Why do we dry clean clothes? Anyone? So I'm a neurologist, so this is not my area of expertise. But as you can see, I'm not the king of fashion either. So we dry clean clothes so our clothes don't shrink. And so one of the earliest dry cleaning agents was kerosene, but that had the unfortunate property of being flammable. So in the 1930s, trichloroethylene's been around for 100 years, was introduced. It's not flammable, and it doesn't shrink your clothes, but it causes cancer. This is known by the EPA, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, multiple myeloma, prostate cancer, kidney cancer, liver cancer, all associated with the chemical. But it's not flammable. And it was used in dry cleaning since the 1950s until its cousin, perchloroethylene, the one that's still used today, took over. But it's also probably more relevant for this audience, widely used in dry and degreasing. Next slide. And so these are the occupations that are associated with possible TCE exposure: aircraft and jet engine mechanics, automobile workers, computer specialists, electronic manufacturers, metal treatment workers, oil processors, painters, printers, water treatment workers, varnish workers. In addition to occupational use, it's estimated that in 1970, 10 million Americans worked with TCE. In England, it's estimated that 1 in 12 workers worked with trichloroethylene. Huge number of consumer and commercial uses. If you clean a gun, trichloroethylene's used that. If you clean carpets, trichloroethylene's been to do that. If you use typewriter correction fluid, if you're young enough to remember typewriters, I am, that had trichloroethylene. Paint and paint removers, some pesticides used in the production of pesticides, wood finishes, stain removers. In 1970, 2 pounds of trichloroethylene per American. 2 pounds of a chemical known to cause cancer, according to the EPA, the World Health Organization, 2 pounds of a chemical known to cause cancer used in the United States. In the most research, it's still 250 million pounds. And wide number of industrial uses. If you remember, I don't know if you guys are young enough, you sprayed something on a car engine and the grease would melt away. Trichloroethylene, possibly. And then a huge number of military bases are contaminated with this chemical, including what's in San Antonio? What's the large base in San Antonio? Which one? There's a huge Air Force base in San Antonio. Yes, KLW Air Force Base. Thank you. I'm going there. So that Air Force Base is contaminated. There are 80 people with ALS, 80 people with Lou Gehrig's disease in San Antonio next to Kelly Air Force Base. I'm going there later this week to see Mr. Juan Reyes, to see if we can provide support to individuals so that future people who serve in the military, the cost of service should not be unnecessary exposure to chemicals from the military. Next slide. So if you drank decaffeinated coffee in the 1970s, you could have been exposed to trichloroethylene. FDA banned that use in 1977. So I'm going to show you, EPA has banned, in 2024, the EPA banned trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene. In 2025, that ban was frozen. It looks like that ban is going to be put into place, but that requires a phase out over 10 years. So people will still be exposed to this for 10 years. Certain states, like Minnesota and New York State, where I'm from, have banned trichloroethylene. California has banned perchloroethylene, so dry cleaners can't use it. Many other nations around the world have long since banned trichloroethylene. It does nothing to address the thousands of contaminated sites. Some of you remember Superfund sites? Yeah, so Love Canal, any Love Canals? So that was contaminated with trichloroethylene. A Civil Action, anyone watch the movie Civil Action? Trichloroethylene. Toms River, New Jersey. Trichloroethylene. Camp Lejeune, the Marine base in North Carolina. Trichloroethylene. So from 1953 to 1987, the drinking water at Camp Lejeune, and when you think Camp Lejeune, think Texas A&M. It's a huge campus, right? It's not just a little small, huge campus. It's got schools and dry cleaners and Walmart. 1 million Marines, their spouses, dependents, and civilians from 1953, 1987 were exposed to a cancer-causing chemical in their drinking water, and the Marines knew about it. And it took an act of Congress for to require the Marine Corps to notify the best and brightest among us that they were exposed to a cancer-causing chemical in their drinking water. That chemical, I told you, is also associated with a 500% increased risk of Parkinson's disease. So my colleagues, Dr. Caroline Tanner and Sam Goldman at University of California, San Francisco, looked at Marines in the 1970s who were exposed to the chemical. So if you're a Marine, you're almost by definition healthy, but almost by definition young. The average age was 20. Some were teenagers. You're only at the Marine base for a short period of time. How many service members in the room? Thank you very much for your service. So you move around from base to base. So you're only there for 25 months on average. Yet 34 years later, Marines had a 70% increased risk of developing Parkinson's disease. And that's not the only base that's contaminated. There are scores of military bases contaminated with the chemical. Our book, the two protagonists of our book are two women, both athletes, both went to the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, both became physicians, both served their country, including in Afghanistan, both are mothers, both were diagnosed with Parkinson's disease within 1 month of one another when they were in their 40s. I asked them to send me a list of the bases where they served and when they served. We put this in the book. Over half the bases that they served at were contaminated with trichloroethylene, known to be contaminated with trichloroethylene. We mapped out, I used to live in Rochester, New York, as Leisha alluded to, and we found that there were over 100 contaminated sites with trichloroethylene or perchloroethylene, the dry cleaning chemical, within Rochester, New York. There were four within 5 minutes of where I live, and I lived in the suburb with lots of doctors and attorneys. And there were 4 contaminated sites, and I drove past them almost every day for years, not knowing. There's no sign. I thought there'd be a hazmat suit, men in hazmat. No hazmat suits, no fence, no signs of any kind to tell you that you're driving next to a contaminated site. There are homes, almost certainly, in Rochester, New York, where I live, that have this chemical in their indoor air, because like radon, which can evaporate from the soil and cause lung cancer, these chemicals can evaporate from underlying groundwater or soil, enter people's homes, schools, or workplaces, and you never know. Yes, sir?
Where'd you get your water?
So it really matters where you get your water. So I know I'm in Texas, and so I know there's not a great deal of respect for the government, but the Safe Drinking Water Act is actually a good thing. So in 1973, the EPA, Richard Nixon, of all people, created the EPA in 1972 following Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. One of the first acts of the EPA was the Safe Drinking Water Act, which requires that all water that you get from city water, municipal water, is tested. So municipal water is tested for trichloroethylene to make sure that the drinking water we have does not have trichloroethylene in it. Unfortunately, 1 in 8 Americans get their water from a private well, like a well on their property. How many people have a well water now? And how many people grew up with well water? Yeah. Look at keep those hands up a little bit more. Right? Just like take a look around. So wells tend to be in rural areas, right? Tend to be near farms, which tend to use pesticides. Those pesticides tend to wash off from those farms, get into the groundwater, and can contaminate well water. Many of you know that, or maybe you don't know, that drinking well water is associated with an increased risk of developing Parkinson's disease. So if you have a well, you should test it. You should test it for pesticides. In our book, we tell you all about this to make sure that you're not getting exposed to pesticides in your water. Regardless, if I had a well right now, I would go home, stop on my way home at a grocery store, and get a water filter. You know, I don't like to endorse products, Pure or Brita, whatever you want. I have one and I live in New York City now. I have a big water filter, a big water jug. I put the water in it, I let it go through the water, and I drink the water out. When I was in Rochester, New York, I just had a little thing around my faucet, so I got the water out to reduce my exposure to these chemicals. If you have a well, you are going to get a water filter. If you have a well, you're going to get a water filter because you do not want to get exposed to chemicals that are linked to Parkinson's. You want to maximize your chance for slowing your progression of the disease. If you have a well, you're going to get a water filter on your way home. Next slide. Yes. So this is here, right? This is in Dallas. How many people know about this site? Wow, no one. 1, 2. So these things are everywhere. So this is a former munitions manufacturing site. I was actually in Charleston, Indiana, which also had a munitions manufacturing site that was also contaminated with trichloroethylene. Here's one, I don't know where in Dallas this is, but Julia, where in Dallas? Is this close? It's close. This is close to you? Help me out. I'm in Dallas. And so the munitions manufacturing site was contaminated with trichloroethylene. the trichloroethylene can evaporate from underlying ground. It gets into the groundwater, as the gentleman in front was indicating, and then it can evaporate, and it was found in the indoor air of 16 homes in the area. Now, when they find it in the indoor air of the homes, they don't tell you how long it's been contaminated. It probably just didn't happen yesterday. It probably didn't just happen a month ago or a year ago. It could have been years. According to the EPA, TCE is carcinogenic by all routes of human exposure. That means there are homes in Dallas, Texas with a cancer-causing chemical in the indoor air, and no one's told them about it. Grand Ferry? Yeah. And then it can get into the drinking water. Fortunately, we have a Safe Drinking Water Act, which should decrease our likelihood to getting it. But if you were drinking a well in this neighborhood, my guess is not a well, but if you were drinking a well perhaps at some point in the past, you could be drinking in this chemical. Known to cause cancer associated with a 500% increased risk of Parkinson's disease. And we wonder why cancer rates in the United States are increasing for Americans under 50. And we wonder why Parkinson's disease is one of the world's fastest growing brain diseases. Diseases have causes. If we figure out what the causes of them are, we can prevent people from getting it. We can prevent needless and avoidable suffering. Next slide. So this is, here we go. Outdoor air pollution. So my colleague, Dr. Brittany Krasinowski, really smart geographer. She's maybe 30 years old. She's a whippersnapper. She lives in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona. And she and her colleagues just 2 years ago, looked at air pollution in the United States. And they looked at areas that had high levels of air pollution and high levels of Parkinson's disease, and those areas are in red. High levels of air pollution, high levels of Parkinson's disease. And then areas of low levels of air pollution, low levels of Parkinson's disease in blue. And if you look at the map of the United States, where is Parkinson's disease highest? It's in the Ohio River Valley and the Mississippi River Valley, and now extending down into Texas. If you don't want to get demented, do not breathe polluted air. So a study looked at 70-year-old nurses, 70-year-old American nurses in the United States, part of the Nurses' Health Study, who were cognitively normal at age 70. So lots of people in this group. Cognitively normal at age 70. They looked at them for, I think, 5 to 10 years. Nurses who lived in heavily polluted areas had greater rates of cognitive decline than women who lived in less polluted areas. So if you live in a polluted area, you're going to get an air purifier. We're going to give lots of recommendations. In our book, we give you the Parkinson's 25. So if you don't like to read and you want the Reader's Digest version, we give you Parkinson's 25. It's filled with pictures. One is to get a water purifier. One's to test your water for pesticides, and another one's to get an air purifier. So if you live in a polluted part of the country, get an air purifier. I have one. I live in New York City. I have one in my living room, and I have one in my bedroom. And if you have a work location, you might want to think about one there as well. Next slide. Yeah. So that isn't normal, right? That is not what air looks like. In Mexico City, air quality was so bad in the early 1990s that birds would fall out of the air. Kids would color the sky brown. A woman, Dr. Lillian Calderon Garcia Duenas, she's the Doogie Howser of Mexico City, went to medical school at age 15. She was concerned about air pollution and its effect on children. So she did a crazy study, a little disturbing study. She looked at the brains of children from as young as 11 months old to young adults 40 who died prematurely in car accidents or for gun violence. She found in 25% of those individuals, she found the pathology of Parkinson's disease. Obviously, they didn't have Parkinson's. They were too young to have the symptoms. The seeds of Parkinson's may be planted early. Think about the individuals who grew up drinking well water. She found the misfolded protein. Parkinson's disease is due to a misfolded protein called alpha-synuclein. She found evidence of that misfolded protein in 25% of children and young adults ages 11 months to 40. She looked at 203 brains. She found Alzheimer's pathology, different misfolded protein, in 202 of the 203 brains. There are reasons that 1 in 3 Americans have Alzheimer's disease. 1 in 3 Americans at age 85 get Alzheimer's disease. These are not natural consequences of aging. Alzheimer's disease has moderate genetic contribution, but the Lancet Commission reported last year that up to 45% of Alzheimer's disease is potentially preventable. Parkinson's disease is far less terrible than Alzheimer's disease. If 45% of Alzheimer's disease is potentially preventable, what portion of Parkinson's disease is? Next slide. So what to do? So that's all the disturbing thing. I told you I was going to disturb you, and now I'm going to tell you what we can do about it. So in the book, we give you the Parkinson's Prevention Pyramid. We give you 25 actions you can take in your everyday life to possibly slow the rate of progression of the disease or to prevent your kids from ever getting it. 25 actions in your everyday life. Most of these things are free, rolling up your window when you're in traffic in Dallas, that you can do to reduce your exposure to these chemicals. We then give you 25 or 20 actions that you can take in your local community, right here in Dallas, to prevent exposure to these chemicals. As I wrote this book, it turned out, I don't know if people knew, that pesticides are sprayed on kids' schools and playgrounds. Did people know this? Pesticides are sprayed on our kids' schools and playgrounds. Many pesticides are nerve toxins. That's how they kill insects. And we ask why 1 in 31 8-year-olds in America have autism. Right? This is happening on my watch and on your watch, right? You are letting your kids and grandkids be exposed to pesticides on their schools and playgrounds. Kids like weeds. Kids like weeds. In California, a mom dropped off her 5-year-old son at Sherman Oaks Elementary School. A guy in a hazmat suit is spraying the hedges with pesticides. Her kid has an asthma attack in front of his mom. The 5-year-old boy goes back to Robin Sewell and says, Mommy, is this ever going to happen again? And she said, no. 2 years later, California passes the Healthy Schools Act, which bans the use of the most toxic pesticides on schools and requires that schools notify parents in writing in advance of using pesticides on kids' schools and playgrounds. If California can do that, Texas and Dallas certainly can, and everyone in this room can call up their kids' school's principal or grandkids' schools and principal and ask them, are they using pesticides on their kids' schools and playgrounds, and could they please stop? And then we need to ban the most toxic chemicals, including paraquat, and ensure that the ban on trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene are put into place. And if people live near these contaminated sites, or they live near where paraquat is sprayed, or they live near a golf course that's spraying lots of pesticides, they have the right to know that they're being exposed to these chemicals. You have the right to know if someone's spraying chemicals that are linked to Parkinson's disease near you. Right? If someone started lighting up and smoking in this room, we would not find that socially acceptable. Why do we find it socially acceptable that in farms in Texas can spray a weed killer linked with 150% increased risk of Parkinson's disease and a doubling of risk if you simply live or work near where it's being sprayed? If people have the freedom to spray paraquat, you certainly have the freedom to know that they're doing so. Next slide. So this is the Parkinson's 25. So if you don't like to read, I'm a neurologist, I like to read. But if you're not a neurologist like most people, and if you're a normal person and you know reading is not your cup of tea, we give you 25 very, 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 very easy things to do with lots of pictures. The book's not in color, but this is the color version. And so number 1 is wash your produce, even your organic ones. Pesticides have contaminated our food supply. Remnants of pesticides are found in 20% of common foods. Organic produce, dairy products, and meat can reduce exposure, but can still have unsafe residues of pesticides. Think about that. In the United States, organic produce has unsafe levels of pesticides. It begs the question what our regulators are doing. So wash your produce at least with water and consider simple vegetable washes, vinegar, or salt solutions too. And we give you 25 recommendations. They're easy to follow. We wrote this with you in mind. You got Michael Oken and Ray Dorsey were on the bright side. We spent 2 years writing this book to change the course of Parkinson's for the 1.2 million Americans with the disease and for the 330 million Americans who don't want to get it. Next slide. Oh, and so we got other ones. Consider air purifiers. Don't poison yourself. You guys are not spraying pesticides on your yard. If you have cockroaches inside your house, you are heading out of town when the pesticide company comes by. You're going to ask them to use less toxic pesticides. You're not going to let your grandkids and kids get exposed to pesticides in their home. You're going to dry clean cautiously. All these are just very, very variable, tangible recommendations that you can take to possibly slow your rate of progression of the disease. Good? Next slide. And then I've told you we can create pesticide-free schools. That is not a large ask. It's not a large ask to get rid of pesticides on our kids' schools. We give citizens the right to know. We need to ban dangerous chemicals. And this is, activists here in Dallas at an EPA national hearing asking to clean our air, clean our food, clean our water. The wealthiest nation in the world can afford clean air, clean water, and food. Next slide. So we gotta do a little bit better on funding. So out of every Parkinson's research dollar, only 2 cents is spent on preventing the disease. There are homes in Texas, there are homes in New York City, there are homes in California that are sold for more money each day than we as a society spend on preventing Parkinson's disease. The economic cost of Parkinson's disease, lots of people with Parkinson's disease, so each person with Parkinson's disease, the economic burden of having Parkinson's disease is about $50,000 per year. About half of that, $25,000 for increased costs to Medicare from healthcare expenses, doctors, prescriptions, medications, physical therapy, music therapy, surgery, and about $25,000 either from lost income or caregiver support. $50,000 per person in the United States. There are 1 million people, 1.2 million people, we'll call it 1 million for easy math, 1 million Americans with the disease. You do the math, 50,000 times 1 million, you get $50 billion. The economic cost of Parkinson's to American society is $50 billion, half of it from Medicare that we're all paying in the form of taxes. I know Texans don't like paying taxes. So if we prevent 1% of Parkinson's disease, the economic value of that is $500 million per year. $500 million per year for preventing 1% of Parkinson's disease. That means that paraquat is responsible for just 1% of Parkinson's disease. When we ban paraquat, we save $500 million. That's more than the Guardian estimates the global sales, not profits, global sales of paraquat is. The United States would be better off writing a check to the makers of paraquat, and you guys can find out where the makers of paraquat, which country they reside in, be better off writing a check to the makers of paraquat to stop spraying it, and we would still come out ahead. $500 million is double what the National Institute of Health spent on Parkinson's research last year, and is more money, 1%, preventing 1%, is more money than the Michael J. Fox Foundation spends on Parkinson's research. If we want to change the course of Parkinson's disease, we're going to need to invest more, and we're going to need to invest more in preventing the disease. Next slide. We need to make our voices heard. So hopefully I've educated you, hopefully I've agitated you a little bit, and people need to make their voices heard. When people made their voices heard for polio, it changed the course of polio. In 1980, the 13-year-old daughter of Candace Lightner was struck and killed by a drunk driver in California. In 1980. In 1980, drinking and driving is legal in some states in the United States. 8 years later, because of Candace Lightner, how many people were part of MAD in this group? Can we get a round of applause for MAD? 8 years after her 13-year-old daughter was killed, nothing she can do to bring her daughter back. Nothing she can do to bring her daughter back. Drinking and driving is illegal in all 50 states. Blood alcohol levels dropped to 0.08. Drinking age is raised from 18 to 21. 10,000 fewer children. 10,000 fewer families, 10,000 fewer schools, 10,000 fewer churches. Communities were torn apart each year because of the work of man. In 8 years. What can we do for Parkinson's disease in 8 years? If Candace Leitner can find it in her heart to do this for us, right? She's not bringing her daughter back, right? MAD is formed by people, nothing they can do to bring their children back. And they didn't say the answer was more trauma centers or better ambulances or anything like that. They said we're going to find the root cause, drinking and driving, and we're not going to make it socially acceptable. If HIV activists, in the face of no federal response, can in 1987 form an organization that says silence equals death, because for HIV, silence equals death in New York City and San Francisco. 8 years after they found their voice, protease inhibitors allow people like Magic Johnson to live lives with near normal life expectancy. More people with HIV in the United States and around the world receive appropriate treatment for their condition than people for Parkinson's disease. Next slide. So I promised you new treatments, and Michael Oken in chapters 8 and 9 of the book gives you the new treatments. He tells you what are the most promising treatments in the near term, like pumps that deliver levodopa. What are some of the most promising treatments in the midterm, the next 6 to 10 years, including adaptive deep brain stimulation? And what are some fancy treatments that could be in the future, including small, very nanotechnologies that could deliver drugs directly to the parts of the brain that are affected? Next slide. We put forth 3 goals for what we can do in the next 10 years. 3 goals for what we collectively can do in the next 10 years. Next slide. So in 2013, UNAIDS created 3 goals for the HIV community. They said that by 2020, in 7 years, 90% of people with HIV will be diagnosed with the disease, 90% of those diagnosed will be treated, 90% of those treated will have the virus not present in their blood. Today, in many countries around the world, people do not have access to levodopa. So levodopa is highly effective medication, the most effective medication we have for Parkinson's disease. It's simple and it's inexpensive. It's a pill and it's safe. Yet many countries around the world do not have access to levodopa. So you have Parkinson's disease, but you have no medical treatment for it. So Michael is very passionate about this, that 100% of people with Parkinson's disease have access to levodopa, which costs the United States less than $1 a day. Less than $1 a day. We can make that available to everyone. We need to increase the funding for Parkinson's disease tenfold, and we need to increase the proportion aimed at preventing the disease from 2 cents out of every dollar to 2 dimes. Told you last year, NIH spent about $250 million on Parkinson's research. About 1.2 million Americans have Parkinson's disease. About 1.2 million Americans have HIV, and NIH spent $3 billion. Tenfold difference. There are people in this room, including possibly me, who do not have HIV because of HIV research. And HIV is highly treatable because of that funding. If we want to change the course of Parkinson's disease, $250 million is just not going to get it done. We need to increase it tenfold. Senator Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia, a Republican, has introduced a bill that would increase NIH funding from $200 million to $600 million next year. She needs your support. And then we need to stop the rise of Parkinson's disease. We need to stop the rise of Parkinson's disease. If we ban paraquat, if we stop using trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene so our clothes don't shrink, if we clean up our air, we can make it so that in 10 years that the rise of Parkinson's disease stops. That adjusted for age, there's a 0% rise in Parkinson's disease. In the Netherlands, which banned pesticides linked to Parkinson's, including paraquat, which had the lowest levels of trichloroethylene in their outdoor air in 1981, and whose air quality improved 50 to 90%, they saw in one study in a 20-year period a 60% decline in the number of new cases for Parkinson's disease. In Germany, which has also cleaned up its food, water, and air, the incidence of Parkinson's disease appears to be dropping. If Germans can do this and the Dutch can do it, Americans can do the same, so that in 2035, not long from now, 10 years from now, We say that the rise of Parkinson's in the United States has stopped, and so that if you invite me back here in 2036 after you've banned paraquat in Texas, if the federal government won't do it, Texas can ban paraquat. We come back and we celebrate. We start talking about the fall of Parkinson's disease because the incidence adjusted for age begins to decline. Next slide. So next slide, what's the progress? So we are making progress. So in 2021, the EPA banned a pesticide called chlorpyrifos. Anyone know about chlorpyrifos? No. So if you've ever eaten an apple in the United States, you've likely eaten chlorpyrifos. Chlorpyrifos is a pesticide that, according to one study, over half of apples in the United States had chlorpyrifos on it. In the lab, chlorpyrifos damages the dopamine-producing nerve cells. That's why you're going to buy organic. EPA banned it. Unfortunately, the manufacturer sued, and the fate of that ban is uncertain. In 2024, President Biden signed the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act, passed the U.S. House 407-9, unanimously passed the Senate. Thank you. It requires the federal government for the first time to come up with a federal plan to prevent, slow, treat, and cure Parkinson's disease. A federal plan to prevent, slow, treat, and cure Parkinson's disease is now the law. I told you the EPA banned trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene last year, and we need to ban paraquat. Next slide. As Alicia indicated, I joined an organization that's focused on preventing diseases, and we have a center focused on the brain, the environment, to measure these chemicals within us and to measure these chemicals in our environment. Many of you know about lead levels. When we were children, 95% of us had unsafe levels of lead in our blood. When we were children, 95% of Americans had unsafe levels of lead. We banned lead in gasoline. We banned lead in paint. The world did not spin off its axis. People were still able to drive cars. People were still able to paint, even without lead in them. Today, our children have lead levels that are 95% lower than we were kids. Our kids are smarter because we got the lead out of paint and lead out of gasoline. What can we do if we get paraquat out of our fields, pesticides off our golf courses, or these less toxic pesticides on our golf courses, and pesticides out of our schools? Next slide. So the people who change the course of the diseases are those who are most directly affected. The people who led the campaign for March of Dimes, the people who led Mothers Against Drunk Driving, the people who led the campaign for HIV are all those who are most directly affected by the disease. It was not an infectious disease doctor who led polio. It was not a trauma surgeon who led Mothers Against Drunk Driving. It was not an infectious disease doctor who led the campaign for HIV. It's those who are most directly affected. We have inherited a world that's largely free of polio. We've inherited a world where drinking and driving is socially unacceptable. We've inherited a world where HIV is preventable with a condom. You have an obligation to receive a gift. We're in a church. You have an obligation to receive a gift, and you have an obligation to reciprocate. And I can't think of a better thing that we can do as the Dallas Area Parkinson's Society, or that I can do, than create a world where Parkinson's disease is not increasingly common, but increasingly rare. And I think not only do we have a responsibility to do this, I think we actually have a duty to do this. We have a duty to ensure that our children and our grandchildren do not suffer the things that we have suffered in life. That's an obligation that we have. That's why you're a parent, is to make a world better for your children. You've now all been enlightened. You've seen the light of day. And we have an obligation to create a world without Parkinson's disease, and that's why I'm here today. Next slide. So if you want to do so, you can order our book, Selfishly. This is where you can do it. You can become a PD Avenger, which is a global grassroots organization focused, founded by and led by people with the disease. Julia's going to hand out cards for you right now. You can email the EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin. His email address is zeldin.lee@epa.gov. You can do that right now, zeldin.lee@epa.gov, and tell him, Dear Administrator Zeldin, thank you for your service. Please ban paraquat. Please ban paraquat. If 1.2 million Americans If every American with Parkinson's disease emails the EPA administrator and tells them to ban paraquat, I have a sneaking suspicion that the EPA would ban paraquat. You can join our Center for the Brain and Environment Registry, and you can help us map out brain disorder clusters. We're passing out cards right now. If you're really fancy, you can scan it with your phone, and we give you links to how to do all that. If you're not technological savvy, if you like pen and paper like I do, you can sign up for these things on your way out, including our newsletter. Let it be that when Alicia and Keisha invite me in 2035, that we're celebrating a world without paraquat. We're celebrating a world where pesticides are no longer sprayed on schools and playgrounds in Dallas, and we'll be celebrating the fall of Parkinson's disease. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions. I think we have questions.
Who was you mentioned a legislator who's got a bill on the floor and I couldn't hear.
So Lee Zeldin is the administrator for the EPA. So you can email him at zeldin.lee@epa.gov and tell him, Administrator Zeldin, thank you for your service. Please ban paraquat. Lee Zeldin is his name. Lee, like L-E-E, like Robert E. Lee. Zeldin, Z-E-L-D-I-N. And we'll Julia right there, we'll give you his email address.
And I believe we've recorded, Tony, are we on?
I'm told we recorded, go ahead.
Yes, I think, Tony, you turn me on. Hello, thank you. So we have recorded all the sessions, so we will have this on our YouTube link. So if you get home and you don't remember all the spellings and the names and all that, you'll be able to go back and actually pause on the recording and gather all that information. Yes.
I think there's some additional questions. There's a gentleman on the right.
Back on causes.
Yes.
With the air pollution, was there any association with children growing up in secondhand smoke homes?
So children who grow up in secondhand smoke are increased risk for having lung cancer and likely other respiratory diseases. It turns out smoking, for reasons that are still unclear to me, is associated with a decreased risk of Parkinson's disease. You're not going to smoke. No one's smoking. It's not in the Parkinson's 25, but it appears that smoking cigarettes is associated with a decreased risk of Parkinson's disease. Yes, ma'am.
I have two conclusions I drew. I don't know if you can answer this yes or no, but here are my two conclusions, and I'd like you to tell me if they're inaccurate. That the reason that these things...
Go ahead.
Oh.
Yeah, perfect. You're good.
These are yes or no. I don't know if you can
Yeah.
answer. Two conclusions I drew.
Yeah.
That the reason that these paraquat and things are still in existence is for people to make money. Is that my correct conclusion? And the other is that there is one party, namely Democrats, that support this kind of anti-pollution stuff more than the other. And I just wondered if that was an accurate conclusion.
So yeah, I think you need to ask the manufacturers why they're still manufacturing paraquat, and you can do a little research and figure out and ask them that question. I think there's a movement in the United States that chemicals in our food, water, and air are causing chronic diseases, and I think Parkinson's disease is just a poster child for that. And I think there's a lot of truth to it. I just think we need to make sure we're focused on the right chemicals and the right diseases, and if we do that, we all live longer, healthier lives, and we spend a lot less money doing it. Yes, sir, in the front.
Coming right over here.
I have friends who use anecdotal evidence to prove that the childhood disease that you mentioned earlier, it's becoming so prevalent. I've forgotten the name, I apologize.
You have friends who use anecdotes?
To prove that it's vaccines that are causing this.
Yeah.
Do you have clinical evidence that proves that there is a tie between paraquat and Parkinson's and those diseases?
Yeah, so our book has 60 pages of references in the back, and so there's about 1,000 references, so if you want to dive deep, you get to do it. It turns out that the best evidence doesn't actually come from academic researchers. Some farmers, especially in the Central Valley of California, where paraquat is widely sprayed, sued the manufacturer of paraquat, And as attorneys will know, as part of that discovery process, the manufacturer had to disclose what they knew about paraquat. According to reporting from The Guardian, a British investigative journal, researchers in the United States and academic researchers showed that paraquat, when laboratory animals exposed to paraquat, developed the features of that in the 1990s. It turned out that the manufacturer, according to reporting from The Guardian, did experiments on 3 different mammalian species, mice, rats, and rabbits, showing that exposure to paraquat reproduces the features of Parkinson's, including tremor. They did those experiments in the 1960s.
I have a question.
Yes.
Right here?
Yes,
I have
ma'am.
a question. This is regarding the pesticides or whatever they spray for mosquitoes. I know they come through our neighborhoods whenever West Nile has been detected on a mosquito in our neighborhoods. And mosquitoes.
I'm
You don't
from
know
New
what
York City. I don't know what mosquito is. You got to help me out.
Oh. A mosquito.
Oh, mosquitoes. Thank
You don't
God.
know what sorry. I mean, I'm a Texan. Though.
Yeah, that's all
What can I
right.
say?
I got mosquitoes.
We have big mosquitoes.
Yeah.
But anyway, they come around certain times spraying at night. You know, they warn you they're coming.
Yeah.
But this stuff is going everywhere.
Yes.
I mean, what are they spraying?
Yes, so listen, pesticides serve a purpose. Rachel Carson, so in World War II, DDT, remember DDT, widely sprayed, prevented millions of people from getting malaria. There is very likely a role for pesticides. Rachel Carson, when she wrote Silent Spring, wasn't arguing against the use of pesticides, she was arguing against the indiscriminate use of pesticides. It would have boiled her soul to think that we're spraying pesticides on kids' schools and playgrounds. It would hurt her that we're on sports fields and we ask why soccer players, for example, have a higher risk of ALS. Paraquat's been around since 1962. I'm a product of suburbia. I don't know much about farming, but my guess is most farmers are not using tractors from 1962. I'm guessing they're using irrigation models that aren't from 1962. I flew here from Colorado. I did not fly in a plane from 1962. I rode an Uber from a car that was not from 1962. If engineers can come up with safer means of transportation, chemists can come up with safer chemicals.